Man gave my son a rock and an iPhone box, so I the entire family to the ground, and then. It happened on a rainy Sunday in March, one of those overcast Midwestern afternoons where the clouds sit heavy and everyone seems to speak just a little softer. We'd gathered at my parents' house in St. Louis for Leo's 10th birthday, which was already tense for me before I even parked the car. My mother insisted on hosting, like always, and I gave in, even though everything in me said not to. But Leo wanted to see his grandma and grandpa, and after everything, I wasn't about to let my own bitterness write the story of his birthday. He was excited. He wore the same red flannel he insisted was lucky, and he kept bouncing in the passenger seat, guessing what kind of cake they'd made. I smiled, nodded, played along, but my hands were tied on the wheel. Something about returning to that house always made my jaw lock. Even now, decades out of that place, I still felt 12 when I stepped through the door. Still waiting to be noticed, corrected, humiliated. It depended on the day. Inside, it was the same stale warmth. My mother's cinnamon candles clashing with microwave dinner smell, her best china laid out for show. My father, Frank, sat in his usual chair, a leather recliner that made a low grunt every time he shifted. He wore one of his oversized cardigans and sipped coffee like he was royalty. My sister Melanie and her husband Travis were already there, wine glasses in hand, faces pulled into tight grins that passed for smiles in that house. I should have left then. Should have grabbed Leo, made up a stomach bug, and bailed. But I didn't. I stayed. I let Leo hug everyone, let my mother kiss my cheek with a wetness that never felt affectionate, and let Frank toss me his usual glance, half challenge, half disdain. We sat. We made conversation. I tried to tune out the undercurrent of tension that hummed like static between every sentence. 30 minutes in, after the cake and before the presents, Frank suddenly clapped his hands like a man announcing a magic trick. "Hey, birthday boy," he said, all too cheerfully. "Go on, open this one. Bet you'll like it." And then he slid a white box across the table, sleek, pristine, the unmistakable packaging of a new iPhone. Leo's eyes went wide, his little fingers trembling as he reached for it. "Is it really?" he whispered, almost afraid to finish the question. His cheeks were flushed with anticipation. I watched him pause, soaking in the moment, as if holding his breath would make the magic real. He peeled off the wrapping paper with surgical care, like the box might vanish if he tore it too fast. I looked at my father and saw it. That smirk. That same smirk he used to wear when I was Leo's age. My stomach dropped. Leo lifted the lid. The room went silent. Inside the white box, nestled in the molded plastic, was a rock. Just a plain, jagged, gray rock. The kind you'd find at the edge of a construction site or someone's unkempt backyard. It was dusty and chipped, and for a second, Leo stared at it like it had to be a mistake. "Is this a joke?" he asked, his voice a little too thin. Frank leaned back in his chair, laughter erupting from him like a sitcom audience had just cued the laugh track. "Only good boys get toys," he bellowed, like he'd just told the greatest joke of the century. Then he sipped his coffee, smug as ever. Melanie burst out laughing, loud and high-pitched, wiping her eyes with a cocktail napkin. Travis chuckled into his wine, barely containing himself. Even my mother shook her head and muttered something like, "Oh, Frank," between amused snorts. I didn't laugh. Leo didn't either. His face stayed frozen, that moment of disbelief slowly melting into something else, something I recognized instantly. The slight sag in his shoulders. The tight way he bit his bottom lip to stop it from trembling. That was me. That was exactly what I used to do when Frank pulled one of his teaching moments. When he wrapped shame in sarcasm and called it parenting. I locked eyes with my father, and he gave me that look. The one that said, "Lighten up, take the joke, be a man." It was the same look he used when I brought home a report card with an A- instead of an A. When he handed me a used jockstrap as a gift after I didn't make varsity my freshman year. When he told me, loudly in front of relatives, that some people just aren't meant to lead. I should have stopped it then. Should have said something. But I waited. Maybe because I wanted to be sure. Maybe because I was hoping, stupidly, that someone else would say something first. They didn't. Melanie leaned over and nudged Leo's shoulder. It's just a joke, sweetie, she said, voice bright but brittle. Not like that's your real present. Except I knew it was. Frank wasn't the kind of man who gave gifts. He gave lessons. Little moral fables in the form of cruelty. He didn't see himself as a grandfather. He saw himself as a goddamn philosopher king. I looked at Leo, and he looked at me. His eyes were glassy but dry. He blinked a few times, then slowly pushed the box away without a word. I reached for him, but stopped. Not here. Not yet. I turned to Frank. My voice was low, calm, too calm. You really outdid yourself this time. He shrugged. Maybe next year he'll learn some manners. Then we'll talk iPhones. That was it. That was the sentence that flipped the switch. I stood slowly. The room stilled. All that fake laughter sucked right out like someone had opened a vacuum. I looked at everyone. The smug smiles, the wine-stained lips, the people I shared blood with who just watched my son get humiliated and laugh like they were at a goddamn roast. I looked at Leo, still quiet, still gripping the edge of the table like it might keep him anchored. And I knew this wasn't just a moment. It was a pattern, a legacy, and I was the last stop. Not anymore. They didn't know what was coming. But they would. Oh, they definitely would. And the next half hour? No one laughed. Not once. I didn't raise my voice. That was important to me. Yelling would have given them an excuse to tune out, to pretend I was just having a meltdown instead of finally waking up. So I spoke slowly, deliberately, letting every word slice through the room like cold wind. You know, I said, looking directly at my father. You've spent your entire life convincing people you're the strong one, the one with all the answers, the wise old man everyone should thank for their trauma. But really, Frank, all you've ever been is a coward in a cardigan. It was like hitting the room with a stun grenade. My mother's mouth fell open, a sharp inhale betraying the shock, while Melanie visibly flinched. Travis looked down into his wine glass like maybe if he focused hard enough on the ice cubes, he could disappear. Frank squinted at me, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. He leaned back, took another deliberate sip of his coffee, and said, "Watch your mouth." I took a step forward, slow and measured, the weight of every insult and dismissal he'd ever flung at me burning behind my ribs. "No," I said, "you watch yours. You just humiliated my son in front of an entire room full of people who claimed to love him. And for what? A laugh. A chance to remind everyone who the real puppet master is." Frank scoffed. "It was a joke." "Jesus, Garrett, are you really this sensitive?" "You weren't joking," I said, the heat rising now, not in volume but intensity. "You were performing. Like always. You find someone smaller, someone who still looks up to you, and you crush them under the weight of your disappointment, just to feel powerful." I turned to Leo. He hadn't moved. His hands were still planted on the table, small fingers white-knuckled against the wood. I hated that he looked frozen, not scared, just stuck, like he wasn't sure if moving would make it worse. My voice softened, just slightly. "You saw it. All of you. And you laughed." Melanie opened her mouth to speak, probably to start her patented therapist damage control routine, but I cut her off with a raised hand. "You want to know what's funny?" I said, turning back to the table. "I brought him the real iPhone. It's in the car. I had it ready. I was going to let you hand it to him, Frank. Give you one more chance to actually be a grandfather instead of some washed-up sitcom villain." A murmur rippled through the room. My mother looked genuinely startled. Melanie sat straighter, her wine glass slowly lowering. "I wanted to believe," I continued, "that maybe you'd grown. Maybe you'd give him something real for once. Instead, you reached into your bag of greatest hits and went with public humiliation. Vintage Frank. Just like you used to do to me." Frank shifted in his seat, uncomfortable now, but still trying to keep that smug mask on. "You always were dramatic," he muttered. I turned to Melanie. "And you? You laugh like it was the funniest thing you'd ever seen. You, the licensed therapist. You're supposed to understand trauma, aren't you? You ever wonder where yours came from?" Her expression cracked just for a second, a twitch at the corner of her mouth that betrayed something real. Then it vanished, replaced with defensive professionalism. Travis was already pulling at his collar like the air had gone stale. He always liked to play neutral, floating above family drama like it was beneath him. But tonight, even Switzerland had to choose a side. Nancy cleared her throat, voice trembling, playing the same role she'd played my whole life. The one who patched over Frank's damage with smiles and casseroles. "Can we not do this now?" she said, her eyes flicking toward Leo. "It's his birthday." "Exactly," I snapped. "And you all just ruined it." Without another word, I walked out of the dining room and down the steps to my car. The wind had picked up, tossing light rain against my jacket. I popped the trunk, pulled out the small wrapped box, and stood there for a moment, letting the air clear my head. Then I walked back inside. The room was dead quiet. I handed the box to Leo, kneeling next to him so we were eye level. "This is for you," I said, voice low. "From me. Because you are a good boy. And don't let anyone, tell you otherwise." He took the box carefully, then looked up at me with eyes that were still glassy but stronger now, like he was trying to understand how to feel. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered, his voice catching at the end. I stood up and turned back to the others. They looked like strangers now, blurry versions of people I used to recognize. "You had your show," I said. "Now it's my turn." From my back pocket, I pulled out an envelope, thick, sealed, heavy in a way paper shouldn't feel. I dropped it onto the table, right in front of Frank. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing it like it might bite him. "It's the updated power of attorney paperwork. You're no longer on it. Effective immediately." His eyebrows lifted. "You can't do that." "I can," I said. And I did. Melanie's husband blinked, then looked at her. "Wait, what accounts?" he asked. Melanie went still. Her face lost color. I saw the exact moment the panic bloomed behind her eyes. "Maybe someone should have told you," I said. "Guess who's been dipping into Leo's college fund behind your back?" "Be quiet," Melanie hissed, her voice low and sharp. "No," I said. "Calm now, the kind of calm that comes after a long, brutal storm. You be quiet." Frank's hand hovered near the envelope like it might explode. His jaw tightened, but he didn't open it. He didn't need to, he already knew. He always knows when he's been caught. "You're making a mistake," he said through gritted teeth. "This isn't how families fix things." "No," I said, letting the cold settle in my voice. "This is how men fix things when families destroy their kids." I turned to Melanie. "Let's talk about that emergency withdrawal from Leo's college fund. The one where you forged my signature and told the bank I'd authorized it." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I needed it for Ellie's therapy." "No," I said. "You needed it for your Bali yoga retreat. You posted the whole damn trip on Instagram. Healing my inner child on the beach. Cute caption. Paid for by my actual child's education." Her husband shot off the couch. "You took money from Leo's account?" he asked, voice sharp. Melanie tried to speak, but I kept going. $2,200. Gone. The teller remembered you. Said you smiled the whole time. "You're overreacting," she snapped, voice cracking. "It's not like I drained it." "You stole from my son," I said. "Don't stand there and act like it was a misunderstanding." Nancy started crying, her voice trembling like that would make any of this easier to ignore. "This is getting out of hand." "No," I said, deadly calm. "What's out of hand is that Frank has been using Leo's social security number to open credit cards since he was 5. Even Melanie sat down. My mother turned to Frank, her voice small. "What is he talking about?" I walked to the side table, opened my folder, and dropped it in front of them. Printed statements, screenshots, and bank records. 3 credit cards. All opened using Leo's number. All maxed. All tied to your address. His name. Your phone number. His future. Frank went pale. Not the fake pale of guilt. The real, hollow one that meant the game was over. He didn't deny it. He just stared at the table, lips tight, hands shaking slightly. "You can't prove that," he said, but it came out brittle. "I already did," I said. "The bank flagged it as fraud the moment they realized a minor was involved. You're going to get a letter soon. I suggest you clear your schedule." I looked at all of them. My sister, her pale face, her husband's stunned silence, my mother's useless tears, and the old man who had poisoned every birthday I could remember. "You raised me," I said, "and I trusted you. But you used my son to protect your credit score. You played grandfather of the year while financially strangling a child. Nancy sat down hard in her chair. You've gone too far, she whispered. No, I said, voice like steel. You all did. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The moment I dropped the second folder on the table, something in the air changed. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was fear, the kind that settles behind people's eyes when they realize they've lost control of the story. This wasn't just an uncomfortable birthday party anymore. This was the unraveling of an entire legacy built on intimidation, silence, and shame. Frank stared at the documents like they might leap off the table and bite him. But he didn't touch them. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He was calculating, trying to figure out how deep the hole went and how much longer he could pretend he wasn't the one holding the shovel. Melanie stood up again, but this time she didn't say anything. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and her eyes flicked between the papers and her husband, who still hadn't moved. Travis was watching her now, really watching, like someone suddenly realizing the person beside them was a stranger. You forged my name, I said to her, keeping my voice steady. And you lied to my face. You smiled at Leo while using his future like your own emergency cash fund. I was going to pay it back, she said, but there wasn't any confidence in it. It was the kind of excuse someone gives when they know it won't matter. You didn't even think twice, I said. You posted pictures of yourself on the beach while Leo was sitting in our apartment, eating cereal for dinner because I was trying to stretch every dollar to make up for what you stole. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her husband looked at her like she'd just pulled a mask off her face. You told me you got a bonus, he said, and his voice cracked in that way that meant something had just broken inside him. I'm sorry, Melanie muttered, but it was hollow. Nancy stood up, trying to salvage what was left of her carefully arranged world. Garrett, please, she said, we're still family. We can work through this. Maybe you don't have to go to the police. I laughed once, just one breathy, humorless sound that made her flinch. You think I haven't already? She stared at me, mouth slightly open. I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocked it, and opened the email I'd saved just for this moment. The fraud report was filed this morning. I have case numbers. I have copies of the bank's internal investigation. I've spoken with a lawyer. And just in case anyone's confused about whether I'm serious, I also forwarded the entire file to the Department of Child Services. They know Leo's identity was compromised. They know it was a family member. They know everything. Frank's face finally cracked. His jaw tightened, and he slapped the table with his palm hard enough to rattle the silverware. You ungrateful little shit, he growled. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. Everything you did for me? Like what? Mocking me every time I didn't live up to your twisted expectations. Undermining me in front of my own kid? Using Leo's name to open credit cards because you couldn't manage your own finances? His mouth opened, but no words came out. You weren't trying to help, I said, voice rising slightly. You were trying to keep control. That's all it's ever been about. Travis finally spoke again. Wait, hold on. How many cards were there? 3, I said, turning toward him. 3 cards, opened over the last 4 years. Frank used Leo's social security number to apply. Then he listed his own phone number and their address. And every single one of those cards was maxed out. Nancy sat down slowly, her hand trembling as she reached for a glass of water she didn't drink. You can't prove it was me, Frank said, but now even he didn't sound sure. I can, I said, and I already did. One of the banks recorded the verification call. It's your voice. You gave Leo's name, and when they asked why the birthday didn't match a typical applicant, you said, and I quote, he's my grandson, but I handle his finances. Frank looked away. And if that's not enough, I added, I have a voicemail from you, left 3 weeks ago. You said, and this is verbatim, it's just some cards, for God's sake. He's a kid. He's not going to use the credit. What's the big deal? That was it. The last piece. The sound of a castle collapsing under its own weight. Melanie sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. Travis just stared at her. Nancy wept quietly, but not in the way that demands comfort, in the way that admits it's all too late. And Frank just sat there, face blank, like he'd finally realized there was no path forward. No clever twist. No manipulation that could get him out of this. "I raised you," he said, low and raspy. "No," I replied. "You trained me. There's a difference. You raised a son who thought love had conditions, who thought approval had to be earned, who believed that being quiet was the only way to be safe. And when I finally got away, you set your sights on Leo." I took a deep breath, trying not to shake. But that ends today. Leo came to my side without being asked. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, close enough that I could feel his small shoulder pressed against my thigh. I looked down at him. He was holding the iPhone box I gave him, still unopened, like it was something precious. I put my hand gently on his back. "We're leaving now," I said. "And if you ever contact me or my son again without a lawyer involved, I will file a restraining order." Nancy gasped. "You don't mean that." "I do," I said. "I've meant it for years. I just didn't say it." Frank's voice rang out, suddenly desperate. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. You're done." I turned to face him fully, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel smaller than him. I felt like the only adult in the room. "You made that choice the second you laughed at my son," I said. "That's the moment you lost the right to call yourself family." I looked at the others one last time. Melanie, pale and shaking. Travis, still in shock. Nancy, quietly sobbing into her sweater. "I'm not your punching bag. I'm not your emergency wallet. And I'm not your scapegoat. I'm Leo's father. And that's the only title that matters to me now." Then I took Leo's hand, turned toward the front door, and we left. The door clicked shut behind us with a finality I felt deep in my chest. I didn't look back. I didn't hesitate. For the first time in years, I walked away from that house and didn't carry its weight with me. Outside, under the heavy gray sky, Leo looked up at me. He blinked slowly, then said something that hit me harder than anything that had happened inside. "I'm glad you're my dad." That was the moment I knew I'd done the right thing. No matter how messy it got from here, no matter what came next, that moment made everything worth it. The fallout started fast, but not in the way you'd expect. There wasn't a dramatic showdown the next day. No one stormed to my door. No threats. Just silence. Total, eerie silence. Like the whole house had collapsed under the weight of the truth, and everyone inside was too stunned to move. For 3 days, nothing. Then on the 4th morning, I got a text from Melanie. For words, "You went too far." No apology, no explanation, not even a breadcrumb of remorse. Just a half-accusation typed with her usual self-righteous detachment. I didn't reply. She didn't follow up. By noon that same day, my inbox pinged. Subject line, "Identity fraud case #28472MO." The bank's fraud department had officially opened an investigation into the 3 accounts in Leo's name. There were attachments, scanned forms, confirmation of the calls I had referenced, and notes from their internal review. The evidence was overwhelming. I'd handed them everything on a silver platter. They took it seriously. At 3:17 p.m., my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice came through, calm but precise. "Mr. Hargrove? This is Detective Amanda Ross from the Financial Crimes Division here in St. Louis. We've received your documents regarding minor identity theft. We'd like to schedule a time for a formal statement." She didn't sound surprised. She sounded like she'd heard this kind of story before. That hit me in the gut. How ordinary this could seem to someone used to this level of betrayal. But it wasn't ordinary to me. This was personal. This was years of silence detonating all at once. By that weekend, everything had shifted. I'd filed the police report. I'd submitted every bank statement, withdrawal slip, forged signature, and even the video footage from Leo's birthday. I had edited the clip down to just the moment Frank handed over the box, the way Leo's face lit up, and the way it slowly fell apart in real time. I included Frank's voice. "Only good boys get toys." And the laughter. That go-doffel laughter. I didn't even need to narrate it. The video spoke for itself. The rest of the family stayed quiet for about a week. Then the second wave of damage control started. A voicemail from my mother came through early one morning. Her voice was breathless, like she'd just finished crying or was trying not to start again. "Honey, please, let's just fix this internally. Families don't take each other to court. Your father's not well. Melanie is a mess. Can you come over? Can we talk about this? I didn't even finish listening. I deleted it mid-sentence. The next day, I got a formal letter from Frank's lawyer. No preamble, no soft edges, just legal language dressed up as a threat. They were considering filing a defamation suit against me. The letter warned me of reputational damage, financial consequences, potential media exposure. I almost laughed. The man who once called me a nice disappointment at Christmas dinner now wanted to accuse me of character damage. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer. Let them try, she said. They don't want this going public. And frankly, we have enough to crush them in open court. She wasn't exaggerating. When I laid it all out, the theft, the forged documents, the video, the voice recordings, it wasn't just a case. It was a full-blown character assassination committed over a decade and wrapped in polite family dinners. The civil trial was scheduled for mid-June. Civil court, identity theft, fraud, misuse of a minor's information. I didn't just want compensation. I wanted a record. I wanted it documented, publicly, permanently, that what they did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. The first day of court, the room was packed. I walked in with my lawyer, documents in hand, and saw the wreckage of what used to be my family sitting 3 rows ahead. Melanie looked like she hadn't slept in a month. She was wearing a blazer that didn't fit right, and makeup she clearly applied in a moving car. Travis sat beside her, stone-faced and unmoved. His arms were crossed, and he didn't even glance in her direction. Nancy wore oversized sunglasses indoors like someone trying to disguise herself in a soap opera. And Frank showed up in his best sports coat, the one he used to wear when he wanted to look respectable during city council meetings. He had that same smug expression, like he thought he might still turn this around. Their lawyer opened with a smile. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, smooth as ever. "Don't you think this has gone a bit too far? Families argue. Mistakes happen. Surely, there's another way." I leaned into the mic, my voice low but deliberate. My son's name and financial future were used like currency by people who then laughed in his face for being too trusting. "You're right. This has gone too far. That's exactly why I'm here." The judge nodded once, and the trial began. Day 2, my lawyer laid out the financials. Side-by-side documents with clear signatures. Records of unusual activity under Leo's social. Withdrawal slips signed by someone who wasn't me. Melanie's forged signature was identical across 3 forms. Day 3, the banker who processed the in-person withdrawal testified. She described Melanie's behavior in detail. Her fake cheer, the offhand lie about being in a rush, the way she insisted on keeping the teller's pen. Day 4, we played the video from the birthday. I didn't watch the screen. I watched the judge instead. Watched how her eyes narrowed when Leo's face fell, how her fingers tensed when the room in the video burst into laughter. When it ended, no one said a word. Melanie took the stand the next morning. She tried to claim verbal permission, that I'd approved it in a call that wasn't recorded. But my lawyer had the actual conversation saved, pulled from my cell records. Melanie hadn't called me once in the entire month the withdrawal happened. Her story collapsed in on itself. Then came Frank's turn. He was asked plainly, "Did you open credit cards using your grandson's personal information?" He hesitated. "I don't recall." Wrong move. My lawyer pulled out the verification call recording. Frank's voice came through the speakers clear as day. "Yes, he's my grandson. He's just a kid. I manage things for him." Then we played the voicemail. The one where he brushed it off like it was nothing. "It's just some cards, for God's sake. He's not going to use the credit. What's the big deal?" The courtroom was silent. Melanie stared down at her shoes. My mother pressed a tissue to her face and refused to look at me. Frank didn't even blink. He just sat there, stone still, like maybe if he stayed quiet long enough, the shame would pass over him like a cloud. The judge took it all in. Final ruling. Melanie was ordered to repay every cent, $2,200, plus court fines and fees. Frank was fined separately. The court formally sealed Leo's credit, ordered that no new accounts could be opened under his name until he turned 18. The case was referred to the district attorney for further investigation under elder fraud and financial abuse statutes. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. What mattered was the look on Leo's face when I told him he was safe. that the damage they tried to do to his future had been stopped cold, that no one, not even people who shared his blood, could steal from him and laugh about it. As we walked down the courthouse steps, Melanie tried to follow. Her heels clicked hard against the pavement. She called after me, voice sharp. "You've destroyed this family," she hissed. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I turned slowly, met her eyes, and didn't raise my voice. "No," I said. "You destroyed it. I just exposed the rubble." She didn't reply, just stood there, blinking like a power outage mid-sentence. Leo looked up at me and asked, "Are we done now, Dad?" I smiled, tired but proud. "Almost," I said. "Just one last stop." And that night, we made it, to the Apple store. He picked out his own case and his own AirPods, and when he looked at me in the checkout line, he wasn't just smiling. He looked proud too. "It's not about the stuff," he whispered. "I know," I said, putting an arm around his shoulder. "It's about respect." I honestly believed things would quiet down after the trial. I thought the courtroom would be the final battleground, the place where everything exploded, burned, and finally died. But like anything that rots from the inside out, the damage didn't stop when the structure collapsed. It kept leaking into the air, into the corners of our lives. I underestimated how deeply some people cling to power, even after they've lost it completely. At first, things were quiet, peaceful even. I focused on Leo, on rebuilding our daily rhythm, on restoring normalcy, on showing him that life didn't have to be wrapped in tension and performance. We moved to a smaller apartment just outside the city, close to his new school and a park with real trees and actual peace. I enrolled him in Aikido classes. We started reading together every night. He laughed more. He slept better. He didn't flinch when his name popped up on paperwork or when mail arrived with unfamiliar return addresses. The tightness that used to live in his shoulders started to fade. 3 weeks passed, then a month, then another. And just when I started to believe we were on the other side of it, the past clawed its way back like it always does. It started with a phone call I didn't expect. 6 in the morning, still dark out, and my phone buzzed against the nightstand. The screen lit up with my mother's name. I stared at it for a long time before answering. I already knew it wasn't going to be good. Her voice was frail, trembling, and steeped in something that sounded almost like desperation. "Your father's in the hospital," she said, not bothering with greetings. "It was a heart attack. They're saying it's serious. He needs a procedure, and we can't afford it. The court fines took everything. He's asking for you." For Leo. I didn't answer her. I just let the silence do the talking. "He regrets it," she whispered. "Please, just come see him." I hung up without a word. A week later, a letter arrived. It wasn't from any of them. It came from my aunt, one of the only relatives who hadn't picked a side, who stayed quiet during the trial but watched everything unfold with tired, honest eyes. Inside was a newspaper clipping, local press. Longtime Councilman Frank Hargrove hospitalized after cardiac complications. Family struggling after recent legal losses. Below it was a link to a GoFundMe. The goal, $40,000. Raised, $3,200. The top donation was from Melanie. It was $10. The note read, "I hope he gets a second chance. Family matters most." It would have been laughable if it wasn't so predictable. Public sympathy, recycled tropes, one last attempt to rewrite the narrative now that the courtroom record couldn't be erased. 3 days later, another call, this time from a blocked number. I answered out of curiosity, or maybe habit. It was Frank. His voice was small, not just weak from the hospital, but hollow in a way I hadn't heard before. "I don't sleep anymore," he said, skipping introductions. I keep thinking about that moment. The birthday, the rock, the look in Leo's eyes. I thought I was being clever. I thought it was just funny. But it wasn't. I know that now. I was cruel, just like I always was. He paused. The silence felt like it was choking the line. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "But if you ever showed up, just once, I'd know it's not over. That maybe there's still a chance." I didn't say anything right away. Then I said, "Leo made a custom phone case at school." He was quiet, probably confused. "It says, 'Only good boys get toys,'" I added. Frank's breath hitched slightly. "That's good," he said, voice shaking. I finished the thought. He said it means bad grandpas don't have grandsons anymore. Then I hung up. I didn't call back. Another week passed. Then one day, Leo and I were driving to the hardware store to pick up paint for his bedroom wall. He wanted dark blue with stars. As we pulled into the strip mall parking lot, I saw them. The remnants of the family I left behind, clustered in front of a folding table with a banner that said "Help Frank Hargrove. Family matters most." Frank sat slouched in a wheelchair, one arm in a sling, face pale and unfamiliar. Nancy stood beside him, holding a stack of flyers. Melanie was pacing the sidewalk, handing them out to strangers, trying to look like the daughter of a man who mattered. I parked across the lot. Just watched for a moment. They hadn't seen us yet. Melanie spotted me first. Her whole face changed. She smiled, this big, manufactured expression, and jogged across the pavement toward me like she'd just run into a long-lost friend at the grocery store. "You came," she said, breathless. "I knew you weren't as cold as you pretend." I didn't say anything. "We were wrong," she continued, her voice full of this twisted sincerity. "All of us. But we're still family." "No," I said finally, locking eyes with her. "We were a cult. One where love was conditional and money was currency. Where silence bought acceptance and shame kept everyone in line." She blinked, stunned. "This isn't about money," she insisted. I glanced at the flyer she tried to hand me. It had a QR code and no apology. "Then why does this flyer have a payment link and not a confession?" I asked. She didn't have an answer. I turned and walked back to the car. Leo was in the passenger seat, watching everything. When Melanie saw him, she lifted her hand and gave a small wave. He didn't wave back. He didn't even blink. He just stared through her like she was a stranger on a sidewalk. Nothing more, nothing less. That was the moment I realized something that hit me harder than anything else. Leo had learned faster than I ever did. Later that night, back in our apartment, we made popcorn and put on a movie. Something animated and loud and full of magic. Halfway through, while the screen flickered across his face, I asked, "Do you miss them?" He thought for a moment, then shrugged. "I miss who they could have been," he said. "But I'm glad I've got you." I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I didn't let it spill. I just nodded and put my arm around him. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the quiet son or the joke at the table. I was the dad who showed up. I was the one who said enough. I was the one who finally broke the cycle. And I didn't lose a family that day. I built a better one.